Welcome to the Jazz Drummers Blueprint Podcast, episode 9 already. Yeah, almost to 10. How about that? I'm Andy.
And I'm Tim.
And today we're going to talk about tempo, all things tempo.
Yeah, that's a good topic for drummers, don't you think?
I think so, yes.
You know what? We kind of talked a little bit ahead of time about some of the things, and I just came up with another topic. I'm going to write it down. I'm not going to
write it down.
I'm not going to say anything else, but yeah, go ahead and talk about what you were going to say, Andy.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, why not get started with how we get started, right? Which is counting off. And I think it's really interesting that in the jazz world, as opposed to the pop rock world, I would say it's not always the drummer that counts off in jazz. In fact, I would say probably the drummer counts off less often than 50%. I don't know.
I would totally agree with that. I mean, I hardly ever count off tunes in jazz settings. Actually, all the settings in my gig last night, I counted off 0 tunes. In fact, a couple of tunes we didn't have any count offs. We just kind of played. Which
That's
was
pro.
Cool.
That's super pro right there.
Yeah, right.
Actually, well, I'll talk about one of my pet peeves a little later that kind of goes along with that. But well, first, it's like, well, let's talk about the hierarchy of like who might count off a tune in a jazz setting, right?
All right.
So I would say number one in the hierarchy of who counts off the tune is the guy writing the paycheck.
True. I would say that's maybe even different depending on the type of gig that you're playing. I'd say it's the guy that wrote the tune. If you're playing an original tune, like for sure. So I think a lot of times if it's the guy that wrote the tune, then they're usually the guy that's writing paychecks too, but that's not always the case. So I would say like the highest hierarchy is the person that wrote the tune if you're playing originals. If you're not playing originals, then I would say then it would be the vocalist if you're playing with the vocalist, because they've got words to spit out. There's plenty of times where I've started counting off a tune where a vocalist is like, whoa, 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 that's way too fast. I got a lot of things to say. So, I think vocalists are probably second. And then probably the person that's writing the checks. That's my third. That's my disagreement with you today.
I agree. In fact, I say that who's counting off, but I think we can also distinguish between who's counting off and who's setting the tempo. So I think that, usually it's the band leader that's going to count off, but it's almost always going to be the singer or the person playing the melody who's going to set the tempo. So many times, like I've played gigs where singers are not comfortable counting off.
Right. You're right.
So what you got to try to do is get them to like sing a tiny bit of the melody for you and get a tempo from it, or they'll like, snap and kind of sing a little bit, or this is about the tempo I want. They might, and then someone else actually counts the tune off. That happens. Yeah, that happens a lot. So Absolutely. And then, whoever's playing the melody, because often depending on how complex the melody is, they might have a specific idea of how they want to do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And melodies really the thing that would determine the tempo of the tune most of the time. Sometimes you have to be careful too with the amount of chord changes that are in the tune as well with the players, because piano players or any of the other musicians that are in the group might have a hard time improvising over really fast chord changes, or chord changes that are changing too many times per measure for them to be able to improvise freely. So you have to be careful with that too. So I would say that's one of the big reasons that we never count off tunes as drummers, because we want to count off things way too fast every single time. I know I do. I'm just like, yeah, let's go. So
well, let's highlight two of those points though that you brought up. I think it's worth spending a little bit more time on. Number one is for the singer is lyrics, right? Mm-hmm. So they need to be able to enunciate the words, and there's a big difference between a singer singing lyrics and a instrumentalist playing the melody, right? Because a lot of times you can, most instrumentalists can play a melody pretty quickly, whereas a singer who actually has to sing words, that same exact thing might have to be a lot slower for them to get out all the words.
And with a great singer, they're not singing words, they're telling a story, right? And so they need to be able to tell that story very clearly. And that's why if you're playing with a great vocalist is a great storyteller. And so with that happening, they're very, very conscious of the tempo, and they know if it speeds up or slows down pretty quickly, and they're very conscious of that. So I think when you're, nothing scares me more than really, really great vocalists, honestly, because they're really sticklers for tempo. So but it is, they have to be able to enunciate those words, they have to get them out. And I totally agree. I think like a saxophone player that's transcribed a lot of Coltrane can probably get out all those words, on their sax a lot differently, because then instead of telling the story with their words, now they're telling the story with their emotion through the melody, right? So, but it's a saxophone, which is a little bit more dexterous, and they don't have to worry about saying the words clearly. They just have to worry about playing the notes clearly, which is a little different, right? So
it is. So anyway, I think that's something that as drummers, maybe, we're not always aware of these little details, that you absolutely, you have to think about that. And, you said, really good singers. One thing I love about working with really good singers is they tend to be really good at controlling the band.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you have a singer that they are going to control the tempo, if they want it to speed up or slow down, they're going to make that very obvious. Ooh. And I think a lot of times if they're really great, all you have to do is pay attention to them, and they're going to give you everything you need.
Okay. So you said something that kind of brought up one of my pet peeves with playing music. And that's when somebody counts off a tempo, you stick to that tempo, and then a few measures later, they say, speed it up.
Yeah.
And like all of a sudden you're stuck like, well, that doesn't make good music. It just doesn't make good music. Like, stick with the tempo. Like, I got to the point now where I don't really play with people that do that anymore. But when I did, I stopped doing that. I make the decision. And I'm, maybe that's why I don't play with people that do that anymore. It's because they don't like playing with me. But it's understandable. I'm okay. I'm not for everybody, but
that's a really, really great point. Two things about that too. So one is, let's say someone else counts a tune off, and, a lot of times, especially when you're not playing with the highest level of players, and maybe even sometimes when you are, they'll have something in their head and they'll count off, and it won't be what they really intended to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can tell that immediately, and it's just like, oh, this is way slower than they wanted it to be. Is it okay to speed it up if they want it to go faster? I mean, I know, like from a pop music sensibility, that's like the biggest no ever, right? It's like you start a tempo, you stay a tempo. But is it okay? And I have a little story with that, and that is a friend of mine, band leader, big band. They usually do this show. It's what I call it a medium-sized band. They go for kind of a big band sound, maybe 8-9 guys on stage. And they had hired a great drummer, like literally world-class, one of the better guys in LA. And the singer counted the song off. I want to say it was too slow. And the bass player, who's the other, who's the kind of musical director, essentially, went to the drummer and was like, we got to go faster. We got to go faster. It's supposed to be faster. And the drummer wouldn't budge.
Yeah.
And, in my mind, it's like, well, okay, in a rock pop world, yeah, okay, maybe. But in this situation, even though that drummer was, A-lister, never hired again.
Yeah. That's
it's tough. Yeah.
and I can't say that I've been in that same situation too. And sometimes I've got a great story. This is a really good one. I've just remembered this one. I mean, I think I'll tell the story in just a second, but the going into just you stick to your guns and pay the piper, or whose decision is it at that point? If you decide not to move the tempo and your musical director is trying to do that, and you decide not to move the tempo, then you are deciding that you don't want to work with that person again through your actions, And it happens. It's just what happens.
It does happen. It does happen.
Are you ready for this?
Wait 1 second before that, because I would just say, I feel like personally, like when a song starts off, I feel like you almost have a few measures of, you have the freedom to move it if you want before it really settles in. You know what I mean? Like if you know, it's like, yeah, this is way too slow. Let's bring it up a little bit. I feel like if you can do that, like right at the beginning, most people, I think it's okay. That's better than.
I totally disagree.
Okay.
Like,
okay.
I like to have things locked in from the very first moment. Like,
well, I mean, ideally, yeah, but
I don't think that, like,
I don't know.
I don't think that there's much room. You know what? I don't do that. So I think sometimes it's eye opening. I've done a few things where, you know, we'll count off a tune, and then for instance, sometimes I play with this band that does Lindy Hop things on occasion. I used to do a lot of that. And they were very specific with their tempos, and I would count off with a metronome. So I'd have a set list, and I would count off, and I would do all the counting off. It wasn't my gig, actually, so that was an interesting one. So that was one, going back to like who does the count offs. In that particular instance, it was always me, because they gave me a tempo, and they just decided, well, you're the drummer, so you have a metronome with you, my phone. And so I would do the set list really quick, and then I'd be able to switch back and forth. And so I would have on my music stand next to me my phone with the tempos, and I would start them, and I would leave the metronome on and just really lock it in the first 4 measures to make sure that everything was there. And then I disregard the metronome, and we'd fluctuate a little bit. But it was really interesting to find out that a lot of times when I would start the tunes, they would want to sag in tempo. And it wasn't me, because I would have to fight the band, and I would just be like, here we go. This is what's going on. And the horns would sag the tempo, and the bass players would sag the tempo a little bit. But once they realized that I was using a metronome, you know, to lock in those times, and they learned how to just hear me and trust me, then they stopped sagging. It was really an interesting thing. That wasn't the interesting story, by the way. That was just like,
oh, that's a good story, though.
Yeah, it's interesting to do it like that. And actually, I sometimes I play these gigs where I'm playing behind vocalists, and it's like kind of one of it's like a vocalist review, and they would do these rehearsals with the piano player, and then the piano player would relay all the information from the rehearsals, like a saint, like keeping me from having to go to these, you know, 1.5, 2 hour long rehearsals, and just he would relay all the information and just like give it to us, and he'd have tempos written out, and I would count off with a metronome, and then we would play and do those things. So that's something that happens somewhat frequently, I guess, in my world right now, is that I am playing a lot of times, or using a metronome to count off. But usually with vocalists, and usually when it's a very specific tempo specific gigs, and not all jazz gigs are very tempo specific, right? So I would say that's more of like a pop sort of style of gig. All right, Andy, I really want to tell my story.
Okay, do it.
All right. And so this is a gig I used to play with this church on occasion. They would hire me for their big productions, right? And I had to play an electronic kit, and I would go in and sight read the shows. They had, you know, the church charts and everything, and it was with a choir. And I would get so frustrated with that, because the conductor would just go, you know, he'd start speeding up or slowing down, and then he'd stop everybody, and very, very dramatically he'd say, "You're rushing," or "You're dragging."
So whiplash moment. Whiplash moment.
Oh my gosh, it was awful, right? And I remember one time, usually it wasn't directed at me, but he would do it. And then one time, the orchestra, I was a paid professional to be there, and the orchestra was full of unpaid, I guess, amateurs, or they were mostly amateurs, right? And so I remember one time he did that. He stopped everybody. He said, "You're rushing." And this horn player pointed at me. He just like points at me, and I was like, "Oh, no, you didn't. No." So after that, I got out my phone, and the conductor would, like, you know, set the tempo for a long time. And so I'd kind of lock it in with what he was doing. And then, you know, through the tap feature, and then I'd lock it in, I'd start it, and he would count off fairly metronomically. And as soon as he'd start, I would start with the metronome. And I had the metronome and earbud in my ear, and I would just play right there with the metronome. and I was fighting the choir, right? And then all of a sudden he would stop. He'd say, "You're rushing." I would actually say, "Actually, I'm not. I've got my metronome on." And I showed him, and he exploded. His brain just could not fathom that I wasn't following his tempo. He was just like, actually he was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, man, I was taking your count off, and I had it in my ear because you were so concerned with tempo that I wanted to make sure I had a really solid tempo for you." And he was like, "So you weren't following me?" I was like, "No, man, this is like contemporary music where you all should be following me, because I'm locking in the tempo really solidly for everyone." And he was just like, "What?" And he could not understand it. And his mind just exploded. And he's like, "Okay, let's try it." And then so we tried it some more, and the choir could not hold a tempo, and he could not conduct them in a way that held the tempo. And so eventually he was like, "Okay, how about you just follow me on certain things? We're going to breathe a little bit." And I said, "You know what? That's fine." And he never again stopped and said, "You're rushing, you're dragging." It was from that moment on, all of that was fixed, and I felt much better about my life.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess it comes down to two, we're drummers, right? So everyone should trust us.
Yeah, but also keep in mind, I don't work at that church anymore. So
I wanted to go back to, you mentioned about horn players, and I don't have that much big band experience. I know you have a lot of big band experience. Mm-hmm. I experienced it with a Latin band I was playing with, where we had a pretty big horn section, maybe 5-6 horns. And that was a real issue. Every time the horns were playing together, if they're playing a unison figure or some kind of harmony or something, it was consistently would drag.
Yeah.
So it was always a challenge for the rhythm section to try to keep it driving forward. And I've heard that about big bands, specifically with, when there's a lot of horns. What's your experience with that?
So big bands, the big bands are nothing compared to a symphony. So that's what I'm going to say right there. In fact, I'm going to kind of skip that. Big bands are going to have their thing. As long as the rhythm section is locked and doing what they're going to do, it's going to breathe a little bit. It's going to ebb, it's going to flow. But as long as you're locked in with the bass player, let them come to you. And so that's actually a piece of advice that I got from working with the pop symphony orchestras. So I played in some pops orchestras, and the first few times I did it, I was like, "What is happening here?" Like the amount of time it takes for a cello, their sound to go from the string to your ears is much longer than the amount of time it takes to hit a snare drum, right? So they're so much more legato, and we're used to this staccato world. Not only that, in those situations, you're set up here and they're set up over here, and so there's a time delay between the instruments. And so by the time they're playing and their sound gets to you, it is actually behind when they actually played it and where you are. And so that can happen in a big band as well. The way that my big band sets up, I'm on one side and the baritone saxophone is on the complete opposite side of me. And I know that he's trying to play in time, but he's faced out, he's faced away from me. By the time I'm hearing his sound, it's behind my beat considerably. And it's not, and on top of that, it's a heavy instrument. It's like heavy as in a low instrument. So for the baritone saxophone to be in time with me, they have to almost be playing in a different time than me to get it to work, right? It's a weird push and pull. And so the big piece of advice that I got, especially with playing with the symphony orchestra, was let them come to you. So you just have to have the utmost confidence in your own time, right? And that's kind of one of the things that leads actually well into another question that we were going to talk about, like practicing with a click and practicing time and everything, right? So one of the big, like that piece of advice, let them come to you, was an interesting thing, because what does that mean, right? It means that you have to have that confidence in your own time. You have to have that confidence in your playing and in what you're doing. And you have to allow and set up a safe place for the rest of the musicians to come to you, right? And so it also means you kind of have to ignore some people. You're going to have to ignore the things that are happening that are way too slow, or vice versa. So you basically, when you're practicing, one of the things that I hear a lot and have done in the past is setting up a metronome to click on weird beats on occasion. Set up a metronome to be on 2 and 4 if you're playing swing. All the quarter notes. I've heard it all, right? So the of 4, the E of 2. Excuse me. You can have it set up any which way you want to have your metronome set up. Now, for me, I feel like I have done this a lot, and especially when I'm playing backbeat music or practicing backbeat music, like, working through grooves and things like that, I really just like a quarter note, and I like to make that quarter note disappear, right? I like to have to check to make sure that the metronome is still on, because then it doesn't matter if it's on the and of 3 or any of those things, because you can't hear it, right? You just can't hear the metronome, and it's not because you're playing too loud. It's because the metronome just disappears. It's burying the click, right? When you record, a lot of times when you're recording, especially if you're recording a pop record or something, you're going to have an 8th note grid usually. Like, they will keep you pretty much right on an 8th note grid. And that's so that your subdivisions kind of stay the way that they're supposed to stay. And there's no less fluctuation in your subdivisions. So yeah, when you're practicing, I think that as long as you're using a metronome when you're practicing, and then when you're performing, you're not necessarily using a metronome, your time will get better. Another thing that I like to do, practicing with the metronome, is practicing pushing ahead of the metronome, practicing following behind the metronome. So you're learning what it feels like, and just kind of recording in yourself. What does it feel like when I'm rushing? What does it feel like when I'm pushing the beat? What does it feel like when I'm pulling back? And you have to, it's not a feeling in terms of like your playing feel. It's an internal monologue check. Does it feel like I'm anxious? Does it feel like I'm too relaxed? Does it feel like I'm right on? Does it feel like I'm pushing but staying in the right zone? So when you're doing those sorts of things, you'll have a good relationship with the metronome. When I'm playing jazz, when I'm practicing jazz, I usually like to put the metronome on 2 and 4 up to a certain speed. Eventually I'll switch it to 1 and 3. Like if we're going above 300, 350, like if I'm practicing that fast, I'll put it on 1 and 3, or maybe just 1 every measure. The metronome slows down as you speed up. And that's kind of the thing with jazz, is that it goes so fast. You can play 400 and above, right? 400 beats per minute. Like,
you can.
I don't even, well, it can happen. You can play that fast, right? So, what you need to do is, when you're practicing that fast, is you need to learn how to think slower, right? So you're thinking slower so that you can be relaxed and you can keep those tempos going and be relaxed while you're playing those tempos. And so one of the ways that you can do that is by putting a metronome on beat 1 at 100 beats per minute, and then you're playing 400 beats per minute. And so that'll help you. Or even just beat 1 every 2 minutes. And it helps you think those larger notes. And so some of you jazz people out there might be going, but 1 and 3 is not, that's not jazz. That's actually not true. So like when you go back to the early jazz musicians and everything, like we have a tendency to forget about 1 and 3. But 1 and 3 are the big beats in jazz, like that. Those are the landing points. What you have to do is you'll have to learn how to dance around 1 and 3 and not make 1 and 3 heavy. But you can certainly feel 1 and 3. You're supposed to. You have to. If you don't feel 1 and 3, then 2 and 4 don't mean anything. So yeah, that's I guess that would be my advice for playing along with metronome. Do you have anything that you've done in the past, Andy? Or?
I think that's great, man. And I agree with all of that totally. I find I probably like actual practice sessions, I probably am playing to a metronome the vast majority of time.
Yeah.
More than 75% probably.
I would say, like, I used to say this a lot to my students. I don't think I say it quite as much anymore, but I used to say, if you're not using a metronome, you're not practicing. So I would say, like, for me, when I'm practicing, like snare drum studies or snare drum etudes or any of that stuff, I'm using a metronome. If I'm studying, I'm 100%. I think I'm 100%. I always practice with a metronome.
Yeah.
I perform without a metronome, right? So I practice with a metronome and I perform without one. What does that mean? It means like you practice. Anytime you're working on something, you're using a metronome. Sometimes, like, if I'm really, really bad at something, I have to get the coordination first, and so I'll skip the metronome at the very beginning stages of me figuring something out. But once I've got it to the point where I can count through it and I can understand it and relate it to the pulse, then I'll put on a metronome and work on it past that. But and when I'm really, really practicing, it's always with metronome. And then when I want to hear myself play it, I'll record myself at the end of a practice session or something, and I'll listen to what I played without the metronome to see if it's sitting with the metronome, like if it's in time, right? So yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, that's good. And I mean, I would say for me as well, I think that probably the majority of that metronome time is probably just quarter notes. I've messed around with the other stuff too, and I think that's great. I don't think there's anything wrong with it per se, but I mean, I think like the bread and butter of your practice with a metronome, I think that's the bottom line.
I think, if you're practicing something like jazz time or any sort of improvisation or something where you're kind of free to do whatever you want, and you're putting the click on a certain beat every few measures or something like that. A lot of times what can happen with that is that you start aiming for the click at those measures. So, and then it affects your phrasing. It affects the way you're thinking about music and time.
A lot can happen in that space.
Yeah. So
good and bad.
I don't want to say don't do it, but I'm also not a huge proponent of it. I remember there was this, I can't think of his name. Joel Beaufort, British, I think he's English drummer, did a lot of he's great, plays with an organ trio out there. Anyway, I saw him do something where he put a metronome on beat one every 32 measures, and he nailed it. And I was just like, oh dude, you're too cool. That's cool, because like in that particular circumstance, you just can't do it. You just have to play good time. You're playing good time, and then you have to know that in 32 measures, it's either going to line up or it's just not going to line up, and you can't aim for that. So you're really checking your time and stuff like that, which actually kind of leads us into our next topic too, which is like, is it okay to have fluctuating time in your recordings and in the world of music? You were telling me, we were just talking about this Charlie Watts thing. Can you tell me more about that?
Oh yeah. So I saw on one of the drum forums, somebody posted up a study that was done where they analyzed Charlie Watts' playing over like 2 decades or something. Mm-hmm. I think it was like late 60s through the 70s. All these different recordings, and they analyzed all different aspects. I think the primary thing they were looking for was to see if he was playing ahead or behind the beat, and which beats he was playing ahead or behind. And then they also looked at, just general tempo fluctuations, and it's really thorough. And like, they didn't just take a tempo and say, okay, well, is he ahead or behind this tempo? There's this like complex algorithm that they used to figure out what the tempo was for that measure, to figure out whether he was ahead or behind with in particular, his backbeats. And it's kind of fascinating. I mean, it's a heavy read. You get into it. I mean, I didn't read every word in the whole thing. I just kind of, 30 minutes, I looked through it. I mean, you could probably spend a couple hours with that thing, but it was really, really, really interesting. And, again, this is back before the day of everything being recorded to a grid, everything with a click track. And the music that was made sounds great, right? Like, I don't think there's too many people that are going to disagree with that. And 2 things. He did play both ahead and behind in different circumstances. I want to say that most of the time it was beat 4 that had the greatest variation.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as you might guess, there's definitely, some tempo fluctuation, mostly with increasing tempos. Right. And one of the quintessential recordings, if you want to hear some tempo fluctuation, is if you listen to the live version of Midnight Rambler, if you know that tune.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy, but it's still pretty cool. But anyway, if anybody's interested, maybe we can. I'll try to get a link for that. Maybe we can put it in the notes on the YouTube.
That's
well. Let's go back. Let's go back to the jazz world, and let's simplify the question. Let's say, okay, you're playing a gig. Is it okay if the tempo speeds up through some tunes?
Yeah.
Is that acceptable?
100% yes. But getting back to the Charlie Watts thing, I hope they did that after he passed. Because if anybody did that to my playing or went back and analyzed all my recordings over a 20-year period and talked about beat placement and statistically I'd play on beat 4 a little early, I would just lose my ish. I would not be a happy human. That is just too much.
I think it was after he passed away because this was fairly recent.
Because man, don't do that to people like that. We don't need to get that analytical. But why? You're losing the point of music. Music is a human experience, and if you're legitimately kind of overanalyzing the human experience. How about this? He's a human that played music. It wasn't metronomic. And he had a great, no matter what you do as a human, you are not going to have Charlie Watts' feel because you are not Charlie Watts. Yeah. So you're going to have to figure out how to become yourself when playing music like that. Just like Steve Jordan was playing Steve Jordan with the Stones, it's just, that's too much. And in this world of overanalyzing things, that just makes my skin crawl, honestly. I know it's fascinating, but and you're into bikes, you're into statistics. You are a stats kind of guy, right? So
yeah, but it actually correlates pretty well with sports science, because in the world of sports science is always catching up to what's happening in the field. There's coaches and athletes who are out there and they're trying different things, to get the best fitness that they possibly can. And then it's usually there's a lag time of years before the sports scientists put together the study to figure out why something does or doesn't work. So I think this is very, very similar. And the cool thing about the study is if you read through it, there's no judgment. There's no Charlie Watts was good, bad, or what he did was good or bad. It's all just hey, this is Charlie Watts. These songs are fantastic. Everybody loves them. This is the analysis of how that came into being. So yeah, I agree with you. It's crazy to think of someone doing that to your playing, right? But on the other hand, it's it's informational.
In the rock world, there's the Red Hot Chili Peppers, right? They never recorded with the click. That's all Chad Smith. And if you put a click on, you can see that it fluctuates. It goes up and down, and you can see where he's pushing and where the band's pushing and where the band's pulling back. It doesn't speed up. It doesn't slow down. They're all within a few beats per minute. It's just it has a lift. There's another song by Green Day, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, off of American Idiot. And I became an expert on that song because it came out, I think, in 2005, and I was heavily teaching lots of kids, and that was a really big song for that time, and it was easy. It did the same thing over and over and over again, and it was a great tune. What I noticed about that tune, I transcribed it from the beginning to the end, and I used to use that as a way to get kids to read music and learn fills and play along. It was a good little transcription. But what I noticed is that the verses were at one tempo, and the choruses were at another tempo, but they were only one beat away from each other. Right? So I believe, if I remember correctly, the verses were at 88 beats per minute, and the choruses were at 89 beats per minute. And that was tempo mapped. They did that very, very much on purpose, right? So it sounds like it feels like it's got a little lift. The chorus feels like it's got a little lift, but the Trey Cool's playing right on the beat. There's no, he's not pushing, he's not doing anything, but he's following the click, which is 1 beat per minute faster. So is that playing ahead of the beat? No, because that is now the beat is that.
Yeah.
And so in jazz, you can have where that comes into play, I think, is when you have a bass player and a drummer, and the bass player's beat. Where's the bass player's beat? If the bass player is playing really in front and you're playing your ride cymbals a little bit behind their beat, that's actually going to match up really well. I think, didn't we talk about that a little bit ago, like in one of the blueprints?
We did. Yeah, we talked about that quite a bit, actually.
Yeah. And it was you, right? Like we were kind of talking about that, and you were playing with the bass player that you kind of differentiated, and you were like, whoa, this actually sounds really good. Do you remember that?
Yeah. So a bass player that I played with who did tend to have a on top feel, he tended to rush. So if I played with him, we would rush all the time. So what I did was I would play, and I wasn't the most comfortable at first, but I got used to it. But I felt like I was kind of trying to pull him back all the time. And in my mind, I was like, oh, this can't sound good. We're not together. And then I listened to it, and I was like, wow, that really sounds good. I was honestly surprised. And after that, I was like, okay, this is just how we work together. And we end up making a great sound. It's just how we do it. Yeah.
So were you playing ahead or behind the beat?
I was playing slightly behind his beat. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and that's what playing ahead or behind the beat really is. It's where's the reference, right? What's the reference? And if that bass player is just like, hey, this is where, no matter what you do, I'm going to push it forward. Then you have to be like, okay, what I'm going to do is rein it in. Right. And so when you do that, then it sits really well. And then you play with bass players who have a beat that's like this wide, and it doesn't matter where you just put your ride cymbal there, and they're like, yeah, I got you. It feels like a cushion, like they're playing, and you're just like, how do I mess this up? I can't. This is amazing. I'm floating right now. So, but yeah, I think that's the real truth about playing ahead or behind the beat. Like there is no doing that in the moment when there's no click track, when there's no other reference. You are just you're either rushing or dragging, I think, in those particular instances, or if you're playing with the bass player and you choose to play behind the bass player's beat, that's you holding back. That's playing behind a little bit. So yeah, that's my general take on that sort of situation. And really, it's gonna, when you're playing, let's say you're tracking something with a band, and you kind of edge up on the metronome, right? If you're playing with a click track, you edge up a little bit. You're a little bit ahead of it. You're not rushing, but you're just kind of nudged it forward a little bit. Then you can kind of pull it back when you need to as well, So those sorts of things happen. Now, you asked the question, is it okay to rush in jazz? Like, listen to Art Blakey, listen to Tony Williams. Yes. Simple answer, just yes. It doesn't matter who you listen to. Everybody rushes. Is it okay to drag? Probably not. Do your best not to drag. Nobody cares that much about rushing. I mean, if you listen to a great one is Mysterioso, In Walked Bud, with Roy Haynes on that one. The album Thelonious Monk, Mysterioso, In Walked Bud. The starting tempo, the ending tempo, but it's like 10 minutes of music. It's gonna fluctuate. It has to. Like it's just not gonna stay the same. If it was metronomic, it would be boring. So.
And it sounds great. And that's the bottom line. Are you making good music?
Great. It's legendary. Yeah. There's lots of great language on it. I don't think anybody there that was there when they recorded it asked for their money back because it rushed. If you listen to great classical music has nothing to do with metronomes most of the time. It breathes, it speeds up, it slows down, it has a life of its own, and it is beautiful. And so as drummers, we have a little tougher time, with tempo and stuff, because like we are very, we're very staccato, and we do have legato notes, but like most of the time we're forced into this world of thinking that time is everything. Oh man, I was speaking of that, I was teaching one of my high school students who has to do like a free form solo, and she couldn't do it. She's just like, time. I got to play time. I'm like, no. Paint with the drums, out of time, and have fun with it, and yeah. So like, it's tough as drummers because we don't know. We're so programmed for time that it can be rough. Listen to Elvin Jones. I saw just last night. I did a concert with where we played the album My Favorite Things. And if you listen to Summertime on that record and listen to Elvin's playing on his solo, there's time. It's there, but it flexes. It's like flex time. and it's incredible, and it's super raw and super emotional and just beautiful playing. But is it metronomic? Absolutely not. Is it Elvin Jones, and is it legendary, and is it some of the best music that you can listen to? Yes. So yeah, don't. I think jazz drummers, we get too hung up, and young drummers too, because everything is to a grid, and the music that people are growing up with now, are the music that people are making, is MIDI hunt and peck. Like they're putting things on a grid and everything's quantized. Man, right before I was watching this, have you heard that Miles kid? Right before we did this, I was watching this Miles kid that makes music. He's like 8 years old, maybe 9 now, and he's just incredible. Like, this kid can hear anything. We'll try and remember to put a link to his stuff on Instagram, because it's incredible. But he had never heard Britney Spears' Toxic before, right? And so his dad challenged him and said, hey, here's the melody, here are her vocals, put music behind it. And so he started putting music behind it. This kid has a complete and total mastery over, I think it's Pro Tools or Logic, and can hear everything. He's got great perfect pitch and just adds things and then quantizes everything. So like that's where I'm at, getting what I'm getting to, is that everything is quantized, right? So he hears things in perfect beats and rhythms, and that's what music is turning into a lot of times, because like everybody's quantizing everything with FL Studios and all the SoundCloud rappers and all that stuff that's happening. It's on a grid, and you can hunt and peck, and you can put things in and take things out, and where's the human? So yeah, it's and that's I think that's just what's happening. I mean, when you go see live shows now, everything is programmed. Everything is with the click. If you go see a larger show that's not a jazz show, if you go see any sort of show, the lights are timed, the pyrotechnics, everything, the dances, like everything has to be done with the click, because if it's not, the show messes up and it derails. Whereas you go see a rock band like the Foo Fighters, there's no click with any of that. They're doing what they do. So I would say I'm thinking Primus uses a click. I've been watching their videos, and I'm relatively certain that they're using some sort of click, just because everything is so perfect. And if not, then okay, cool. Stand corrected. But
before we go, the last thoughts about click track stuff is back to the question: is it okay if your jazz tunes speed up a little bit, especially in a live situation? Yeah. I think the answer is it's okay. I wouldn't necessarily recommend people try to do that. I think
don't actively speed up.
But. Yeah, and you don't want it to go crazy. What I would say is that, like, I've been in a couple situations playing vibes where my band has sped up so much that I could not play the melody correctly on the head out. That was kind of a bummer, but everything sounded good, and it's like, oh my God, I don't think I can play this melody. Like Song for My Father, on the vibes. On piano, it's pretty easy, but on vibes, it's pretty hard, because, there's a lot of movement.
A lot of jumps.
So yeah, a couple of times it was like, I don't think I can do it. I guess the bottom line is for me to get better, but
so
but you do have to keep that in mind. Like, and a singer too, we talked about, a vocalist singing the lyrics, and usually what happens if you're working with a singer will sing the head, and then there'll be a whole bunch of solos, and then the singer will come back in. So, again, if you've sped up so much that the singer can't sing the lyrics properly on the head out, that's a little bit of an issue.
It is an issue. And one of the ways that you can combat that as a drummer is sing the melody in your head, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're constantly aware of the melody and where it's at, and you remember, you can develop a tempo memory. You have to remember what the tempo was. And a lot of times when I play with people, I know that sort of the solos kind of have a lift, and then when we go back into the melody, we kind of get back to the same tempo that we were at somehow.
And I think that's okay.
I totally agree.
I was going to mention that. It's like, it doesn't want to be a lot, right? Like, you can't go like 20 beats per minute. Okay, that's good.
But you're not doing that.
But a couple of few beats per minute, I think that's totally fine. It feels natural, and it relaxes as the singer comes back in, or even the melody player, depending. And I think a lot of times too, especially with ballads, as a rhythm section player, we get too antsy. Like, we want to play too much, we want to play too fast, instead of just enjoying enjoying the ballad and listen to what people are doing. As drummers, you know, you hear so many times a drummer will jump right into double time because they're like, oh, I'm bored playing this. Let's go.
Funny enough, the ballad that's on My Favorite Things, Elvin and McCoy go right into double time.
Yeah. I mean, there's a time and a place for that, but it shouldn't be every ballad. You know what I mean? So, you know, take your time, enjoy listening. That's what I love about playing ballads, because you really listen to what everybody else is doing.
You can paint. Texture,
and
beautiful. And if you allow the bass player and the rest of the band to have their time, right? Yeah. You can kind of stay out of the time if you want and just create textures, and it's beautiful.
And the danger, I think, with ballads too is if we get complacent at all, they can drag, and there's nothing worse than a dragging ballad.
Right.
It gets slower and slower, and next thing everybody's
how long will it take? Yeah. Okay, I have one last question before we wrap this up. Whose responsibility is keeping time in the band?
Everyone's.
That's right, Andy.
Responsibility. And I would, to prove that point, listen to any of the jazz greats playing without a drummer. Mm-hmm. They all sound amazing, fantastic, perfect. Like and I love listening to those guys do that. All great jazz musicians have great time. If you don't have great time, you might be good, but you're probably not one of the greats, because all of the greats have killer time instinct.
Okay, so let's leave it on that. What record, do you have any records that you could recommend like that? I have a couple that I'm thinking of.
I'll let you give a couple, but you know what? Hold that thought, because there's two things I wanted to do. One was pet peeves. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let's go back. Let's say, okay, let's go all the way back to the beginning. We'll like bookend this, right? And then you can give your recommendations. What do you think is necessary for a count off? In my mind, I need two things when someone's counting off. I need a pulse, and I need a downbeat.
Yeah.
Right? You need to know where one is, and you need to know what the pulse is. I don't care if you're snapping your fingers. If it's a jazz tune, I'm going to assume as a drummer that you're snapping on 2 and 4. I've been very wrong about that.
Yeah,
on occasion. So you try to get it, but as soon as they say 1, whether it's with or snap or not, you're going to get it, because there's your downbeat and you have the pulse. So that's what I need. What do you think?
I agree. Okay. So this is what my biggest pet peeve is: this 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes. That's on my, I have that written down. Slowing down your count. Yeah, it's got to be consistent
in the count. Like it's crazy. Or my friend Jacob, he's this is really funny, that he was playing on this national TV thing in Australia. He's from Australia. He's a great saxophone player. I was playing with him last night too, and this is one of his old stories. But he said he was doing this national televised thing, and the song was going to be in 7, and it was something weird, but I can't remember exactly what it was. I want to say that, let's just say the song was in 7. I don't think this is an accurate story anymore, but this is along the same lines here, right? And the guy's like, okay, guys, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That wasn't 7. So yeah, that's that can happen. I don't like that. Sometimes, you know what? Okay, counting off odd meters. Sometimes I just like hearing it in 4. Sometimes it can be easier to count off odd meters in 4, like 7, 5, things like that. Other pet peeves: not being able to hear the person that's counting it off. Sometimes I play with some people that are like 1, 2, 1.
That was my other pet peeve.
Yeah,
I call it the silent count off, or the secret count off. That's what I call it. You're trying to keep the count off a secret from everyone, including the band.
Well, some people are just really soft spoken, and like I feel sometimes they're the ones that count off the band for some reason. Never understood that. Not making sure that everybody's ready. If you're about to count off a tune and the piano player is digging through their charts looking for something, that's a big problem. Actually, that happened to me once. I was playing with the symphony, and the conductor was about to count it off, and I'm right next to the conductor, and I'm looking, I'm like, I don't have my chart, and he's counting it off. I'm like, wait. And he's like, I said, I don't have my chart. And I was like, I've got it memorized. Don't worry about it. I think I told you this story, right? It was the Barbra Streisand Jingle Bells, right? And I had it memorized because I shedded that thing. I knew it. I was like, I got it memorized. And the conductor's like, no, you don't. Find your chart. It's there. I was like, all right, cool. And I accidentally had taken the chart off, and it with the previous chart, it stuck to the previous chart. And so I dug through it, finally found it, put it on the stand. Hardest tune of the entire set. Now I'm totally amped, you know. that was tough, but like being aware of the band, making sure that everybody's actually ready to go, I think is a really important thing. Like when I count off the big band, when I play with my big band, I look at everybody, I'm like, ready, you know, just really loud and making sure that everybody knows 1, 2, you know, and we count it off and we go. Being really obvious is really an important thing.
I think, obvious, right? That's a fantastic descriptor. Okay, so you need a pulse, you need a downbeat, and you need to make it obvious to the whole band. I think that would be the criteria. I was going to say, I've told singers in particular, you know, the ones who have that secret count off. I've told them flat out. I've been like, come on, give me Bruce Springsteen. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. Like, that's fine. I'd much rather you have that than like 1. Or they'll say 1, then they'll turn around so you can't hear the pulse.
Yeah, I can't hear him anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that you know, hopefully, it's probably not many other musicians listening to this besides drummers, but that would be my hope for the world, that everyone would be able to count off a tune effectively. And I think everyone should. All instrumentals you should be able to count the tune off. You should be able to get the pulse in your head, you know, get it going and count it off. And there's a million different ways to count off. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, you have to do this or you have to do that.
You know what? You know what's great? My favorite. I did a gig with a very well-known multi-instrumentalist, we'll say, and she counted off a tune just by with her foot, you know, and like we were all just there. Da, 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 da.
You knew where the downbeat was? The first foot hit, and you knew the pulse, right?
It was all there. No numbers, no anything else. It was just like boom, boom, da, 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 boom. We were on, you know.
I got to see Jerry Gibbs, you know, Terry Gibbs' son, doing big band, and he just it's not like grunting, but like, you know, kind of syllables. He'd be like 1, 2,
Yeah, I do that
too. Fine.
Yeah.
So it was fine. They hit it. They hit the downbeat every single time.
Yeah, 1, 2, you know. That way you don't have to count to 4. You know?
So I think it's way better if the audience hears your count off. I think that's totally fine. And even if you don't want that count off to be, you know, loud or anything like that, that's way better than having the band not come in on time because they couldn't hear you, I think.
Man. So a couple of records to check out, like especially virtuosic musicians that sound really great and have an amazing time. My favorite records are Bill Evans Alone, Bill Evans with Jim Hall, Intermodulation and Undercurrent. Those are just 3 incredible records right there. So yeah, those are the ones that the time on that is impeccable. No drummers, just other instrumentalists killing it.
Yeah, cool. So okay, and that made me think of a couple. You know, those first couple of Ahmad Jamal records that we talked about in the very first episode. There's one called Ponciana. The record's called Ponciana, but there's no drummer on this particular record. Right. It's guitar, bass, and piano. And there's another guitar, bass, and piano called what is it? I don't remember. I'll have to
That's
think
all right.
The new jazz chamber music or something like that.
Yeah.
New jazz of the chamber music, something like that. I have the album cover picture in my head, but I can't think of the actual name. But anyway, those early Ahmad Jamal with no drummers, fantastic. Also, Oscar Peterson trio with no drummer, the one where there's no drummer, amazing.
Totally incredible. Yeah, Ray Brown, Herb Ellis, like that stuff is Oscar Peterson's time is just unbelievable. But you listen to any of those guys, you can listen to their rhythmic complexity, their relation to the relationship with the quarter note, like that. Listening to that. Oh man. I don't know if Jeffrey Keezer has any solo records. I'm not sure if he does or not, but I have this thing that he did. It's private. Can't share it with anybody, but oh my God, his time is insane. So anyway, I think that should probably wrap it up, Andy.
here I thought, I was like, oh, we'll talk about tempo. This will be a short, easy one. And like, I'm thinking it's like, there's like a million different things we could talk about, you know.
We're drummers. It's our main topic, really. We could do a part 2 on this if we wanted to.
Yeah, maybe like we'll listen to it and we'll figure out if there's some stuff that we left out. Maybe we'll try to
for sure. All right, leave us some comments. So what are some ideas that you guys have?
Do you use a metronome? You know, anybody who's listening, do you use a metronome? And what percentage of your practice time do you use a metronome? And do you put it on 2 and 4? Or do you put it on all 4 quarter notes? I'd be interested to hear what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, that'd be great. Awesome. Well, until next time, thank you all for listening. And Andy, thanks for being here. Thanks for